Cheerio and welcome everybody to another book review for the Gentleman Voice, and this one is actually for Todd S. Todd S., you asked me to look into more fantasy novels for you, and I am doing just that with Robin Hobbs' Dragon Keeper. Now Robin Hobbs, I'm going to say, is actually one of my favorite, and is actually probably one of the best fantasy novelists we have at this time. And I'm happy to say that she is one of my favorites, but only in certain cases, because there are some stories of hers I just can't get into. But we'll get into that in a little bit. So let me give you a synopsis quickly of the Robin Hobbs story, Dragon Keeper. So I'm going to have to look at my notes because unfortunately it took me a while to get through this one. And I wanted to be sure that I could actually remember it perfectly. So Elise, who is a scholarly woman who is studying dragons and is seeking a break from her loveless marriage to a guy named Hest, travels to the Rain Wilds to study newborn dragons, and I'll talk about the reason that they are newborn dragons and why they are actually weak and deformed when they hatch. Mistreated by the humans who agree to tend them, these dragons arrange for a journey to a fabled city called Kelsingra to make a better life for themselves. And so the journey begins for the dragons, their caretakers, and Elise to find this lost city. And that's a great concept. I like that concept, except for the fact that it takes, let me see, probably about this much of the book to even get to that point. And the way to get there, it's really slow. By the time you get to that point, it's so slow and boring. You know, not really invested in this. I think that possibly Robin Hobb might have started the story in the wrong place. Or, okay, the first 3/5 of the novel, actually, is all set up. It's set up and explanation and showing you what these characters are like. And yeah, okay, fine. But now let's talk about those characters. So, character-wise, we start with Leftrin, who is a captain on a barge that's a live ship. And a live ship is a ship that's essentially almost alive. And that's a great concept. I think it's actually one of the main topics in one of her other series called the Live Ship Trilogy, which I could not get into. But, he is a river captain on this barge, and he's also a trader, and he deals sometimes with illegal goods, including some of the cocoons for the dragons. Okay, now let me explain that part really quick and divert myself onto that track. So the dragons, they are originally sea serpents who then go up the river. That was my phone. Interesting. Hold on. Sorry about that. That was someone calling because it was arranging something for my Dark Shadows review, which is coming out soon, and it's probably actually going to be out around the end of the week. But back to what I was talking about with the dragons. They are originally sea serpents, and they come up the river and they make cocoons out of some sort of memory silt thing. It's very weird and interesting. And then these dragons, because they are in a more acidic place, but they're not used to, and it's complicated, but they hatch deformed and weak, and they're not exactly like true dragons, and everyone's kind of ashamed of them. No one's really that interested in them. But, so Leftrin actually spends some of his time picking up some of these cocoons and turning the wood into stuff that is used to make live ships. And it's like, okay, that's great, but this concept does not ever come up again in the novel. In which case it's like, what the hell was the point? And then we have another character named Thymara, and she's a subhuman who lives in the Rain Wilds where the dragons were born, because she is essentially sort of like part animal-ish. It's weird how, I don't know exactly the logistics of how she was born part animal, but apparently she was, and the people are like, well, we don't like you kind of people, and she's supposed to be taken into the woods and left to die, but her father went and picked her up again and took care of her. It's like, okay. And so she agrees to go on the trek with the dragons on their journey to find Kelsingra, because she's hoping to at least make a better life for herself, and also present a little bit of money to her parents who have been taking care of her. Then we have Elise, like I mentioned before. She's the scholarly woman who studies dragons, and then she's in a marriage to a guy named Hest. And Hest, let me be very upfront about this. I have nothing against homosexuality or anything of the sort, and Hest is definitely a homosexual. However, he is in a marriage to Elise, and the reason that he is so that way he can be able to do what he wants still, because he made an agreement with her, pretty much it's just like, we're not interested in each other, but we do need to be married, so let's at least be married. And so they're married, but he is abusive and he's unlikable. And for that reason, it's like, okay, Robin Hobb, you've written homosexual characters before, and you've done it very well. And it's done well here too. It's just, the character is not likable. I would rather see someone who's like that, who is more relatable, who is more of a sympathetic character that we can care about. Whereas here, he's just a jerk. And he's an abusive jerk, which is even worse. So, I'm sorry, but I just could not get behind this character. And it's not because of the fact that he's a homosexual. It's because he's not a good person. And then there's his secretary, who is also a homosexual, who he has the relationship with for the most part. And he's the interest of Hest, and he's an old friend to Elise, but he's not really in between them, because he's like, okay, well, I sort of ish belong to Hest, and I sort of want to be his thing, I want to be his friend. It's like, okay, but he's not likable either. So it's just like, I mean, he started out more likable, but then as time went by, it's like, no, I don't have any interest in you or helping you get through your quest. And then we have one of the dragons, Centaura. She's the main dragon that we follow, and she also gets called Sky Maw, which is confusing. She gets called Sky Maw because she lets one of the people give her a name because she doesn't want to give her own, and it's like, okay, but then a few chapters later she gives her name. It's like, well, what was the point of calling her Sky Maw for a few chapters? And these are all characters. The ones I'm listing now are characters that we do get the viewpoint of. There are narrating characters, and there are quite a few. In other Robin Hobb stories, usually it's limited to either one or a couple, as far as I know. I still stand by. I like their single narrating characters a lot better, personally. But we have all these characters. We have all their individual stories. And it takes a long time for the stories to actually converge into the main plot. And you saw when let me hold up the book, because I think that was actually another time I was talking about this to someone. But right about here or so, now let me back a little bit more. Probably right about here. This is all set up. This part of the novel is all set up. This is the actual novel story. The story that I gave you the synopsis to is essentially that last half. And the problem is, it starts out exploring the characters, and then it jumps forward in time. You're like, oh, well, where are we now? We're further in time. It wasn't really made perfectly clear. So that part, not as good. And we jump forward several months, apparently. A long, long time. And there was too much focus on the setup and less on the actual payoff. So, a little bit disappointing on that. And that's why it took me so long to get through this novel, because I was reading and I was like, I'm just bored. I'm not into this. I don't really care about any of these characters. Well, at least sort of I cared about, because you understand, it's like, well, I'm sorry that you're in this situation. But the way that Robin Hobb made us actually be sympathetic to her was sort of a manipulative way, by making Hess so unlikable. But let me see. Yeah, I mean, we just start to understand the characters, but then we jump forward in time, and then we have to get everything that happened in that time told to us in summary, and it's not that interesting. And half of the storylines that had started there were dropped, like Leftrin with the living wood that he was going to sell to make another ship, and it's like, okay, well, could have incorporated that a lot better. So, all in all, it was a slow beginning. Once you get to the next part, it goes a lot faster. I finished the last part in about 3 to 4 days. Finally! As in, I wanted to read it before, but it took a long time to actually get to that point. And then I recommend it mostly to diehard fantasy fans who are seeking another novel, who they want to read a novel by a really good writer. This would probably be it. There's some stylistic things that bother me, but as a casual reader, I don't think it will bother you too much. And if you're also a fan of Robin Hobb's writing, this is definitely something that you would probably enjoy. Now, I don't enjoy it as much as I enjoy several of her other series. I enjoy the Assassin's Apprentice series, which is also called the Farseer trilogy, and that was a wonderful series. The first one I read of hers, and I loved it. It was amazing. It was a great story, and it focused on one character. The Fool's Errand series, which is called the Tawny Man trilogy, and that one focused on one character and his interactions with all the other characters. Well done. Really good. Not as good as the first one, but really good. There was another series called the Live Ship Trilogy that I couldn't get into. I'm sorry. It was just, when I was reading it, I was like, I don't, no, closing it, going away, walking away. And now there's this one. I think there might be others I don't know much about. Like, Soldier Son Trilogy. I never looked at that one. Maybe I should. I don't know. But, all in all, it could have been good if it wasn't so slow. I think that I was more invested in some of the characters than the others, and I didn't like how a lot of the characters were used to just manipulate you to care about this character's plight. And trust me, there are a lot more characters that show up later in the novel too, and it's like, oh my goodness, there's so many characters. We're almost in a J.R.R. Tolkien novel, which, it happened. I know it happens. But, that is essentially my review, and yeah, I don't really have much else to say about it. I probably will not continue the series because I just wasn't gripped by it until the end. And now that they're on the journey, it might be really good, but I think I'd rather find another novel that I am really into, and I'll give you a review of that next time. So keep an eye out for that one, Todd S. Keep an eye out. In the meantime, thank you for watching this, and comment, subscribe, like, whatever you want to do. But if you want to discuss this novel or ask me a question about it more in depth that I did not address something you were wondering, I can actually address that more in the comments and probably say it a lot clearer and more eloquently than I am on this video. But in the meantime, thank you for watching this video, and as always, cheerio and farewell.